Well, hey Yardners, it's Destry. Welcome back to my kitchen tonight. Tonight we are going to be dividing dahlia tubers. You can see I have a whole plethora, a whole counter full of dahlia tubers, and tonight we're going to be getting in there. I'll show you some of my tips for storing my dahlia tubers tonight, at least how I'm going to try to do it. This is my second year dividing and storing my dahlia tubers. So hopefully you can learn something from this video, and maybe it's something that you want to try in your garden this year. So if you haven't seen my video previous to this where I dug up all my dahlia tubers, I will link that one in the description below for you. Basically, I took the other day, I got in there with the pitchfork and I dug up all my dahlia tubers. So what I have now are these clumps of dahlia tubers. And dahlia tubers are really, really fascinating, I think, because you can start with just one tuber, which kind of reminds me of like a potato. And in one season, that tuber can multiply into many, many tubers. And just one tuber can produce an entire big, giant dahlia plant, right? And lots of blooms. So for my cut flower stand this year, I relied heavily on dahlias. So I want to be sure that I try to save and maintain as many of these dahlia tubers as I can. It will save me money. It will increase my collection of dahlias, the number, the plants that I'm able to have next year. So this is kind of what they look like when you, cut the stalks, dig them up out of the ground, and then I hose them down with a pretty good spray of a hose. And then they've been sitting for 24 hours in kind of a warm-ish, dry place. Not too dry, but they've just been in my greenhouse where it's around 50 degrees. So now my task tonight is to go in and divide them and store them. So there's only three things that you need for a successful dahlia tuber. You need the body of the tuber, which is usually this kind of longer part or the thicker part. You need the neck of the tuber, and then you need an eye. So the eyes are really hard to see, but basically it's some of the flesh up in this area. And all three of those things have to be intact in order for your dahlia tuber to survive. So for instance, when I was digging this one, I damaged this tuber. So it could be that it's viable, it could be that it's not. The other thing is when you're storing the tubers, they have to stay slightly damp, but not too wet. So for instance, if I see any dahlia tubers that show any indication of like desiccation or rot, I want to get rid of those. If any of them are squishy, let's try to see if I can find one. So here's one that's all squishy and gross. So I want to be sure to get rid of that because I don't want to introduce any rot into the storage of them. So they have to stay slightly damp. So if you think of it like kind of like a potato, if you had a potato and it got too dry, then the potato wouldn't be any good, right? So it's kind of that same sort of consistency where it's not too wet and not too dry. So the way that I'm going to achieve this perfect consistency of wet moisture level is with some cling wrap, some press and seal. So you can use plastic wrap. I did watch Laura from Garden Answer this year use press and seal, so I'm going to give it a try. One thing I had trouble with last year was my plastic wrap kind of coming unraveled, and then again, things can get too dry. And the other thing is I'm going to check on my dahlias a little bit more. Last year, I basically just threw them in a bag. I threw them in my greenhouse and I didn't really look at them again during the season, which kind of cost me some of my dahlias. I did have some of them that got too dry. And I think it's because some of that plastic wrap came unwrapped. So I'm going to try the press and seal this year. So my goal tonight is to snip and trim some of these dahlias to try to increase my collection, kind of separate them out and make them easier to store. And then I'm going to wrap them in the plastic wrap. And I just store them in either a box or you can use, just bags from the grocery store. I did use paper bags last year. I might switch and use plastic bags, but again, I don't want to introduce too much moisture. So I'll probably just use paper bags. And then you want to store them in a dark location that's somewhat cool. So if you had like a basement or like I could put them in my garage, like an insulated garage, maybe a shed that doesn't get too cold. You don't want them to freeze. So they have to stay somewhat warm-ish, but not like the temperature of your house in the winter, which is, our house is right around like what, 70 degrees. That would be way too warm. So someplace a little cooler than maybe your house. One thing I did not do this year, which again, I'm a novice here, but I did not label them. So what you also can do is you can use some tape and label the different varieties. Personally, I don't care what they are. But you know, again, that's something for next year. I didn't have any of that particular tape, so I didn't label them. So I'm just going with the flow here. But you know, I am gonna kind of go in here and inspect them. So like this one here, this tuber right here is broken off from the mother plant. So I don't have very high hopes for that one. Same with this one, it's a little spindly and like the tuber itself is pretty small. So I could just keep those with the clump, but chances are I'll snip some of these off. I also am gonna snip off all the roots just to make it easier to store these. So first things first, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna snip everything down, anything I see that I definitely am getting rid of, any of the roots, and kind of start to process these. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but hopefully I can get a really good, good selection of dahlias to store over the winter. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna process, I think I'm just gonna do one clump at a time. That just makes more sense to me. And I'm also gonna maybe grab a different pair of shears that are a little longer than these snips. So I'm just getting rid of kind of all of these little scraggly roots. And this one still has some dirt in it. So I'm working on in my kitchen on my messy mat, which if you don't have one of those from Amazon, those are great. And again, I can see that a couple of these tubers have been damaged. But I'm gonna get in there and see if I can start to separate these out a little bit. Another thing I might use is just a long, like serrated kitchen knife to kind of cut things apart. That actually might be handy too. So I'm gonna dig out some of this mud. This one has some dirt in here still, so I'm gonna kind of carefully get rid of some of that. And then I think I've got a couple different stalks here. I think I'm gonna try to separate this one into thirds if I can. I don't know, maybe I'll move on to the next one here. I feel like this is kind of what happened to me last year, is it took me a while to kind of get going and get some confidence. And then once I got going, I was a little bit more confident to make decisions. I also feel like there's some kind of tubers that are easier to separate than others. Like these ones that are really fat and round for me are a little harder to figure out what's a tuber and what's not, versus the ones that are a little bit longer and skinnier and kind of look like a sweet potato more. Those ones seem to be a little easier for me to figure out what's what. Sometimes there's kind of a natural way to kind of pull them apart. So this one has these two, this one has like two stems right here, and I can just kind of, look at that. They just kind of came apart for me. So that was convenient. This one's still got a little dirt, but try to get rid of some of that if I can. Okay, so for that one, I left, you know, part of the stem stalk up here, which would have the eye, and then the tubers are here, and then kind of the neck. So those are two that I just separated. And again, I'm not sure if I'll have tremendous success, but even if I have a little bit of success, this will be worth it. So I'm gonna put sticky side up, get rid of some of this extra soil. And these are two similar ones. So I'm gonna wrap them, I guess you can't see this. I'm gonna wrap them up like this. And then I'm gonna put the second one that was that same kind next to it and make sure the tubers aren't touching. And then I'm gonna kind of push in my corners here. So this is the same kind, but I did put a little length of the wrap in there. And I'm gonna tuck in my edges here like that. And then just make sure everything is sealed up nice. So again, that one had a little bit of dirt and there might be a little bit too much moisture. So that's why it's important I go through and check them about halfway through the season, or through the winter, I guess I should say. All right, let's try to get into another clump. This one is damaged. I could try to keep it, but chances are it won't work. And this one doesn't really have much to divide. This is just one big giant one, and then like two little baby ones, and just a bunch of stalks. So I think I'm just gonna keep this as one piece, and I'm gonna just ditch the stalk, the stems or the stalks. Get rid of the roots. Yeah, so I'm just gonna keep that as one lump. So you don't have to go too crazy. And if you're not sure, like, you know, just try them, keep them together. I might end up needing more press and seal too. This one has a big rotten part to it. Big rotted out tuber, so I'm going to get rid of that. Oh, it has a couple rotten ones. Weird. That's rotten. This is rotten. That's damaged. This one doesn't look like it's in very good shape here, but we're gonna try it. It had that big rotten piece right here, so I tried to remove as much as I could of that. In fact, I might take a little bit more off. I don't have high hopes for this one, but we'll wrap it up anyway. So this one's kind of weird. So this is the mother tuber, but it's all rotten in the middle. There's like a big, it's just all gross. So, but I was able to divide everything else around it. So, but I'm not going to keep this one because you can see it's all split. So it's just interesting how this works. It's interesting to see what we've got here. That would have been a good one, but it got split. This one, I don't know about that one either. All right, guys, well, here's the aftermath of my tuber dividing and storing. It's pretty crazy. This is what I'm keeping. So you can see I have two big bags just filled. And the ones that I left behind are, you know, either like this one is squishy. That one I showed you that had a big hole in it. Ones that don't have, you know, the neck, ones that were kind of breaking off. A lot of this is roots. So like here's one that looks like it would have a neck and a growth point, but then it's broken on that side, you know. So I did go through them with a fine-tooth comb, and I saved any of the ones I thought were going to be viable. So all of these, like there's a chunk out of that one, like none of these I think are going to be viable, and obviously I have enough here. I have more than enough. So all of this is going in the garbage. But, you know, again, I could come through here and probably try keeping some of these, but I have a feeling most of these are not viable. So I'm going to go ahead and get cleaned up. All right, guys, well, I'm all done with this project tonight. I hope this video gave you some ideas for dividing and saving your dahlia tubers. It's really not that hard. Well, it is hard. You got to dig them up, you got to deal with them, all that. So But if you want to save any of the flowers that you loved this year, or you just want to try to increase your collection or save some money, I would say give it a try. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, like my channel, and subscribe and all that good stuff. And if you need me, I'll be hanging out in my yard or possibly in my kitchen now that it's cold outside. I'll see you next time. Bye.